Okay, let's talk about the endocrine system. This is the system of glands in our body. This is, it's a matter of communication system that we have in our body. We have the nervous system, which is the electrochemical communication system. The endocrine system is strictly chemical, and it's a chemical communication that is in our bloodstream. So the glands that we have are the organs that produce and release, that are the organs that release these particular hormones. The pituitary gland, the thyroid, parathyroid, pancreas, adrenal glands, ovaries, and testes. They use chemical messages sent to the blood to regulate our body. It's a slow communication system, especially compared to what's happening with the nervous system, which is very fast. But it is interconnected with the nervous system because, again, you think about the fight or flight response, which is controlled by the sympathetic nervous system, but it also involves the release of hormones like norepinephrine and epinephrine. This is coming from the adrenal glands. So these are clearly linked, the endocrine system with the nervous system. So those hormones are those chemical messengers. Epinephrine, which is also called adrenaline, increases heart rate, blood pressure, blood sugar. Again, it's released during an emergency situation because your muscles are going to need all that energy to be able to move fast. The pituitary gland has been called the master gland. It is essentially also controls the rest of the glandular system, the endocrine system. And actually the hypothalamus controls, is above that. The hypothalamus is involved in body regulation, which is really what the endocrine system is all about. Okay. The anterior pituitary lobe, regulates other than the posterior lobe, regulates our water and salt balance. So like two parts of the pituitary. The thyroid and parathyroid glands. The thyroid gland is affecting metabolism. The parathyroids are involved in regulating calcium level in the blood. The adrenal glands, again, they release the hormones during the emergency situation. And the adrenal cortex regulates salt and carbohydrate metabolism. Take a look at the pancreas. This is important when it comes to regulating blood sugar. Finally, the gonads are the sex glands. Men have the testes, women have the ovaries. They secrete sex hormones. And this is important in terms of, developing secondary sex characteristics, involving reproductive, sexual desire. It involves, sending messages regarding sexuality. So these are important in terms of sexuality. Okay, now let's talk about genetics. A lot of researchers in biopsychology, that seems to be their focus, is on studying genetics and how it relates to behavior and mental processes. Well, let's break down the important terms. You have chromosomes, genes, and DNA. The chromosome, they are in the nucleus of the cells of the human body. You have chromosomes, which essentially contains all of our genetic information there, all of the information, the genetic blueprint of who we are. Well, you have these chromosomes that are made up of these strands of DNA. The DNA is a complex molecule that makes up the chromosome, and short segments of those chromosomes are called genes. So we can isolate certain parts of the chromosomes, the genes, that may relate to different aspects of our behavior or who we are physically and whatnot. And the DNA is essentially the chemicals that make this all up. The Human Genome Project was involved. It was a project of trying to map the entire human genome, the entire from top to bottom, what the chromosome, identifying all the genes in the human chromosome. And it turns out that it has been successful, and they've actually mapped out all of the genes essentially in the chromosome package. It's a lot of information, obviously, but it's been done. And that's been a very good launching point towards studying maybe certain genes might make people more susceptible to certain kinds of illnesses, like breast cancer. And having that knowledge allows the person to prepare themselves for the future and basically perhaps to prevent themselves from getting sick. With another thing to recall is that there are certain kinds of characteristics which have a dominant gene and a recessive gene. So, in other words, with parents, if you have, if you have both the dominant gene and the recessive gene, you get one from the dominant gene from one parent, the recessive gene from the other parent. You have both. Well, the dominant gene is going to show up physically. So, for example, blue eye and brown eye is one example of that. As an example of that, my wife has brown eyes. I have bluish green eyes. My children, however, both have brown eyes. They have my wife's brown eye genes. They also have my bluish green eye genes. However, the brown eye is going to be dominant, blue eye is going to be recessive, and therefore they both have brown eyes. However, it is possible that my daughters might get married and have children of their own. If my lady marries someone who has the blue-eyed gene, and they have a child, that child might have a blue-eyed gene from the mother and a blue-eyed gene from the father, and if that's the case, then it's possible that my grandchildren might have blue eyes. The study of molecular genetics is kind of looking at it at the genetics at the molecular level, and again relating that to our behavior. So I'm trying to identify behavior and mental processes, perhaps at the molecular level. Selective breeding is a controversial topic when it comes to human beings. It's not so controversial when it comes to plants. In other words, we want to be able to grow the sweetest corn that will produce as many ears of corn as possible. That's selective breeding there when it comes to plants for fruits and vegetables. But we don't really like to talk about it when it comes to human beings because there might be certainly some ethical concerns about doing that. There's a lot of research done with adoption studies, studying differences. Oftentimes you'll have twins who maybe have been separated at birth, and you can compare the differences between two people who might be genetically identical but they're raised in different places. You also have certain circumstances where you have parents who adopt children, and you look at similarities and differences between the parents and the adopted children, and you compare it with the biological parents, and you see that in many cases the biological parents share a lot with the child, more so than the adoptive parents, even if the child spends the most time with the adoptive parents. Again, this indicates the influence of genetics on who we are, behavior, and mental processes. Another term to remember is the genotype. The genotype is actually what your genetic heritage is. This is what your genes, this is what you're getting from your mom and dad. This is what your genetic package is, okay? But you are not an isolated being. You are existing in the world around us. You are affected by the environment. And the environment can also trigger certain genetic responses from you. You have certain genetic traits that might lie dormant unless triggered by an environmental circumstance. So environment is crucial to how you grow genetically. But you have your genotype, which is essentially just what you're born with from your genetic heritage. Then you have the effects of the experience, you add that in, and your result is what you call your phenotype. And your phenotype is what's observable, your observable characteristics. Do you have blue eyes or brown eyes? Do you have dark hair or light hair? That kind of thing. But it's not just that, because we're talking about psychology, we're not just talking about physical features. We're also talking about your behaviors and mental processes that are part of your phenotype, part of who you are. But again, it's not simply just genetic or just environment, it's a combination of both. Environmental effects should not be discounted. When you have different phenotypes, different, you may have different people who grow up in different ways. But you may have people with similar genotypes that have very different phenotypes, and it has to do with differences in environment. If you have, again, you think about someone who's a pair of identical twins. If they are raised in different environments, they're going to develop some differences in phenotype. Genetically, they're identical. For example, you could think about how your upbringing can have an influence. If you have a nourishing environment, then everyone is going to do better than people who are in a poor, malnourished environment. So if you've gotten a lot of stimulation intellectually, if you've gotten good food to eat, if you've been safe, if you have a lot of positive stimulation, then everyone will do well. But even then, even in a nourished environment here, you are still going to have some individual differences. So like in this flower pot, some flowers do better than others. In the poor, unnourished environment, they all do more poorly, but there's still going to be individual differences. Finally, just to round out, we're going to be talking about how health and wellness relates to biology. Stress can have an enormous effect on us biologically, and the way we cope with stress is very important in terms of how we can be, how healthy we can be. Everybody experiences stress, but we cope with it differently, we perceive stressors differently. All of this is important when it comes to our health and wellness, and this is the link with biology. So again, it's our response to those stressors that is key, and when we get to the chapter on health psychology toward the end, we'll get into more detail on this.